thank you so much for inviting me on with this very distinguished panel. And little old me, a mum from Wigan, has been invited, so it's really humbling. Thank you very much. Just describing the UK situation, it's like we're going for a scorched earth policy. We've got up to 20,000 children a day being infected with COVID. We're up to 98 deaths now of children. 2 children have died, heartbreakingly in the last 24 hours. One of them was aged between 0 and 4, and the other one between 15 and 19. So that's the reality. Condition. When we talk about conditions in schools, I mean, in the UK, we've got some of the most crowded classes in Europe. No masks, although because, cases have gone absolutely through the roof, the government do things like say, well, masks, but just in corridors, which doesn't make sense because COVID doesn't know to stop at the door, does it? Some of the things are just really silly. We're up to, Deepti would be able to give the updated figures, obviously much better than I can. Last count, it was 1 in 12 secondary school children, which is kids aged 11 and over. 1 in 12 have got COVID, and in primary it was 1 in 33. So the prevalence is very, very high. Just talking about my son's school, there's 612 pupils in his high school, and it took 6 weeks for 170 of those pupils to get COVID. So in 6 weeks, just short of 30% of the kids had COVID. No social distancing, masks if you're lucky, not mandatory. No isolation of close contacts, which I find absolutely insane. So my child could be sat next to somebody who's got a parent at home with COVID. With 53,000 kids have got long COVID, over 11,000 have been poorly for more than a year, and there's just nothing to protect them. When we talk about ventilation, I mean, it's open a window if you're lucky, or open a door. So it's quite grim, the reality. My questions to the panel would be, because I do want my children in school. I think most parents do want the children in school, but it has to be safe, and it clearly isn't safe at the moment, which is kind of where the school strike has been born out of it. We've tried everything else. We've written to politicians, we've sent video messages, we've had meetings with Kate Green and the Labour Party, and nothing's being done. And in the meantime, children up to 20,000 children are being infected every single day. So my question for the panel would be regarding can schools be opened safely at the moment, or is there just too much COVID, and what kind of mitigations would we need in place, or is that just like we're way past that now because of the level, 1 in 12? Is that too much to contain? And my other thing is about the long-term impacts. I think there's an absolute radio silence in the media in the UK and from the government. It's presented as something that is very low risk to children. Long COVID isn't even touched. So if I can, those would be my 2 questions to pose about, can you give some more of the reality of what COVID is in children, and the long-term effects, and can schools be made safe, and what would we need to do in order to make them safe? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, the UK policy on children is frankly, I don't know, it's actually criminal. It's not a policy that I'm aware any other country is following. So we currently, as you said, have 1 in 12 secondary school age children and 1 in 30 primary school age children infected. And a lot of that is down to the government policies, which have led to a very, very high community transmission rate. So 1 in 55 people in our community are currently infected. And, we don't have masks, we don't have ventilation schools, we have the largest class sizes in Europe, and children who are contacts of cases don't have to isolate. So if I had COVID today, my daughter, it would be mandated for her to go to school tomorrow. I could not keep her at home because I would be threatened with fines and prosecution. And similarly, if somebody next to her became a case in class, we wouldn't be informed that she had been sitting next to somebody who was infected, and she would be expected to attend school every day. So, these are the policies in the UK at the moment. And of course, we were the latest to offer vaccination to adolescents, and we are still only giving them one dose, which is exceptional compared to almost all countries in the world, except perhaps Norway. And, the proportion of adolescents who've been vaccinated in England is possibly the lowest in Western Europe. So in all respects, our government has completely failed to protect children, and the impact of that has been not just mass infection children, but very high rates of long COVID. So, we now have had a jump in long COVID in young people and children. We have over 50,000 children living with long COVID, of whom 11,000 have had symptoms for more than a year. So these are children, many potentially with chronic disability. And our government still keeps comparing this to flu in children, and scientific advisors have said that it's good for children to get infected rather than vaccinated, because this is a good way for them to get immunity, which is one of the things that they use to justify a one dose approach, because clearly infection is considered a booster for children here. So what can be done with such high community transmission? 1 in 55 people infected. It's very, very hard to keep schools open, even with the best mitigations in place. All countries that have managed to avoid a back to school surge have had much lower rates of community transmission and very strict measures in schools. And by strict measures, I mean masks in primaries and secondaries, and not cloth masks, N95 masks like the ones being used in France, for example, and Austria. Ventilation, so supplemental ventilation when external ventilation not adequate. Bubbles, which have been removed completely in the UK, aggressive identification of cases through rapid testing and through contact tracing and quarantine, not having mass gatherings like assemblies, which of course we are having with hundreds of pupils in England, and moving activities like PE outdoors or just cancelling them for the time being while our community rates come down. And of course, accelerating vaccination. We've seen a huge impact of vaccination on transmission in 16 and 17-year-olds, more than 50% of whom have received one dose, versus 12 to 15-year-olds where, vaccination has stalled. So I think there are lots of things we could be doing, but I don't see the will in government to do this. And sadly, our scientific advisors have been complicit in rationalizing a herd immunity approach in children. So this is exactly the Great Barrington approach that we heard about last October, which is focused protection of the vulnerable through vaccination here, and herd immunity in children who are considered, boosters for adults, and infection is boosters for them.